Becoming a successful professional speaker is a journey. How do you find that first stage, the next stage, and then the bigger and better stages? I'm Lee Hayes, your host. My co-hosts and I are here to guide you to a more successful speaking career. You're listening to Path to the Main Stage podcast. Welcome to another episode in 2026, Season 3. I am so excited to be here. Thank you to everyone who has reached out and given me so much encouragement and feedback about Seasons 1 and 2, because I am up-leveling the podcast. I have found that it's not just emerging speakers listening, but these people who've been in this business for years who are saying we're getting so much out of your co-hosts, so I need to take it to another level. Today's guest is going to be great for those of you who are getting on your first stage, but let me tell you, if you've been doing this for 10 years or more, or 20, you're still going to get something out of today's speaker, because he's at that level where he's going to help you bring it up, learn more about yourself, more about your audience, and bring out more out of your keynotes. My co-host today is Owen Fitzpatrick, who is a thought leader, an author, a speaker, master's degree as a psychologist. So he's going to talk about not only the subject matter, but the psychology behind it to really help you up level. What Owen talks about on stage is that it's not just what you think, it's what you believe in. And that matters when you're a speaker too. You need to believe what you're talking about, and you need the audience to believe in you too. So thank you so much, Owen, for joining me today.
My pleasure, Lee. It's always a pleasure chatting with you, and delighted to share whatever I can, and also learn from you as well today about some of the ways in which I can improve myself too.
Well, thank you. Thank you. So I'd like to start with inner propaganda. I want to start there just because with speakers who are newer to stage, the question often is, do I deserve to be there? Is my information good enough, right? Can you start us out there? How do you know you're good enough, or how do you help yourself become good enough?
So what I'd like to do is start off by challenging the question, good enough. Because I always, whenever I work with clients, and I used to, as a psychologist, I used to work with clients as well, and they would say, oh, I'm not good enough. And it always struck me that there was a sort of an emptiness to that term. So when we say it, when we use it all the time, but when we use it, what do we actually mean by good enough? And I always say, for what? So if you say, I'm not good enough, if you're talking about morally, okay, compared to who, right? Compared to Hitler, for example, well, of course, I'm way better than him. It's a ridiculously low bar. But you're good enough in the sense of the evaluation you make is going to be compared to what or at what. And so when we talk about, am I good enough as a speaker, to do what? And what I always look at is, I think we get so obsessed with measuring ourselves to go, am I good enough to be able to charge this? Or am I good enough to be on stage? Or I'm good enough. Well, the answer is you're good enough to try. And when you're there, you're good enough to make an impact. But I think as long as we're evaluating as if we've this fixed mentality of I'm either good or I'm bad. Because the problem with that is that we're always experiencing this sort of, once I do X, then I'll be good enough. Once I do Y, then I'll be able to charge this amount. And to me, I'm constantly trying to improve. Every time I'm speaking, I'm looking at what I could do differently. And that doesn't mean that I don't believe in myself as a speaker. It means because I believe in myself as a speaker, it allows me to grow and improve and work and get better and learn everything that I can. So whenever you are listening to that, I call it inner propaganda, because it's not just inner dialogue. It's not just that we talk to ourselves. It's also that we are programming ourselves. We're cultivating belief. We're weaving stories that protect us in some way, stories that we've heard for all our life that we grew up with, stories of our culture. In Ireland, for example, we're very much, we're constantly, I suppose, weaving stories of don't get too big for yourself. Don't think that you're too great. So therefore, that keeps us on the ground, and it's because we love humility, and humility is important to us, but it can have a detrimental effect. So inner propaganda is the way I describe the way we persuade ourselves of things, the stories that we sell to ourselves, not just that we tell ourselves, but we sell to ourselves, become the beliefs we buy into. And so when we communicate in this way to ourselves, oftentimes we convince ourselves, I'm not worth it, or I'm not good enough. So therefore I can't charge this amount, or I can't speak. if you ask the question, are you good enough to speak to an audience? Of course you are, because everyone has something to offer. Everyone has value to add. But then it comes to how much value are you adding? And there's people in the industry, as you well know, Lee, that might be the most entertaining speakers in the world, and they charge so much more than someone who has a message that can completely change your life. And then vice versa, you have people that are, because they're so entertaining, they're the ones that grab your attention to the point that you listen to their message, and then it changes your life. So the real trick, I think, and then I would love to hear from your perspective, because to me, you're the person who's so much experience in terms of working with speakers and coaching speakers and, hiring speakers and whatnot, is I think that we need to, first of all, believe in our ability to be able to speak to audiences and to be able to get paid for it. But then to be able to look and go, every single time I speak, I want to get better than I was before. I want to learn from that. I'm not just a finished package because my audience gave me a standing ovation. I'm never a finished package. I'm constantly growing, improving. I'm being more persuasive. I'm being more engaging. I'm being a better storyteller. I'm being clear with my key big idea. I'm teaching frameworks in a simpler way. Most important of all, the audience is walking away from my presentation, my speech, not just inspired, but they believe something different about the world. And that in turn means they're going to behave differently too. But would love to understand from your perspective, when people are challenging, when, speakers are struggling with their own inner propaganda, what are the kinds of things that you think are most important for them to remember?
Well, I'm gonna answer that sort of in a twisted way. And the first thing is, I think it was Ted Lasso. I don't know if you watch the show. Nate's father, he said, talking about humility, he said, humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's thinking of yourself less. And I love that. And I think it's so important. There are two things that speakers can do. So the one is, yes, you need to constantly improve, constantly next to the next keynote. And I think the best speakers I work with are always doing that, right? Every single time they speak, they will watch their own video or look at the feedback objectively, right? That you've got to be careful not to be crushed when somebody says, I didn't like what you did, but rather, how can I make it even better next time? What does it take to connect? What does it take to elevate the experience for the audience? But on the other hand, I do run across the speakers who go, you know what? I am fabulous. And if they didn't get it, that's their problem, right? It's all about me. My story is great. I'm the best. I'm the best. For those speakers, again, I think it doesn't mean that that's beyond self-confidence, right? That's ego. And I think when you look at your talk and go, it doesn't get better than that, you need to check your ego at the door and say, no, you can always do more, right? You like you were saying, you can always up level. So I think that's my advice is, what can I do better next time? Even if it's one little thing, because you learn through practice, where is the jokes? Where do people laugh? Where do they really listen? What are the best feedback I get for takeaways? So take that and always tweak it, make it a little bit better. Because you know what? Time also changes. What was the perfect keynote last year might not resonate as well this year. So you always have to upgrade.
I love that. And I think, even when you said ego, I think it's also insecurity. If I have to make sure that I don't take any feedback because what I did was perfect and I was amazing and the audience is the one with the problem. First of all, well, then you should just speak to yourself because you're the only audience that really appreciates you, right? So, speak out loud to yourself in a room. But the other thing is that oftentimes people do that not just because they think that they're amazing, but more often than not, I find that people are doing this out of insecurity. And one way to deal with insecurity is to say, I'm no good, I'm terrible, I'm the worst. What did you think? What did you think? What did you think? And the other way to deal with insecurity is, I'm the best. If you don't get that, if you don't realize how amazing I am, blah, blah, blah. I think I like to get what I call an anti-fragile identity. And that means something that keeps getting better. The more lessons, the more learnings, the more mistakes you make. So and obviously Nassim Nicholas Taleb came up with this notion of anti-fragile. So whatever adversity you face makes you tougher and stronger. And to me as a speaker, it's about going, okay, how can I get even more effective? How can I, and really to some degree, you can look at numbers as well. And, how much does this person get paid and that person get paid? It's not so much. Sometimes there is legitimacy to that. So, if you see a $50,000 speaker or a $10,000 speaker, there's probably going to be a gap in terms of quality in some aspect. But also you can see a $100,000 speaker that's just famous, that doesn't know how to speak, that can't string two words together, but because they have achieved something amazing in business, or because they're famous in some other way, people will pay that. That's what the market demands. So I think, looking at yourself and then measuring yourself based upon how much money you're charging isn't the way to go either. The key to me is that they can all be barometers, but it's looking at, right, how do I ensure that I'm getting more effective at whatever it is that I do well? Because as you well know, Lee, some people are amazing storytellers. Some people are great from an academic point of view. Some people are great, like engaging the audience and charismatic and whatnot. Some people have a balance of it. Some people are hilarious. Some people are like, make you cry. Like, everyone has their strengths. But the core thing is, are you doing what you're good at to the best of your ability? And are you getting better whenever you have a difficult audience or whenever you get feedback that, challenges you?
So let me ask about that, because we were just talking about, some speakers go, well, the audience didn't get me. That's their problem. It's the speaker's problem, right? How do you get buy-in from an audience?
To me, the very first, I always think about the first 5 to 10 minutes of a presentation, and I think to myself, how do I win them over? I'm not thinking about my opening and going, okay, first I need to do A, then I need to do B, then I need to tell them what I'm going to talk about, then I need to explain why it matters to them, then I need to explain how the format system, all that's good stuff. But to me, whether I do that or not, or whether I just open with a story, my goal in the first, 5 minutes or so is to both enter their world, but to bring them into my world. And that means I'm completely and totally present in the moment. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to, obviously I try to use humor quite a lot in my presentations, because that sort of is something that I enjoy. And I'm trying to get them laughing. And then if they don't laugh, I'm getting them laughing about the fact that they're not laughing. I'm sharing a little bit about myself so that they see that I'm a little, I suppose, strange, because I am probably a little weird in terms of the way I think or whatever. But I'm trying to give them a real experience with a real person. This is not a preordained, overly organized speech that seems, suffocating in structure. This is somebody who's speaking to you, and they have a message. And yes, I absolutely believe in what I have to say, but I'm really going to be joking around with the audience. I like to get them responding to me. That's particularly important. I learned that when I did a lot of speaking, traveling to different audiences. So I would work being translated into different languages. And so when you're getting translated into Japanese and it's sequential and you got to wait for the response, you really learn the importance of timing. You learn the importance of energy. It can be a long, long day if the audience isn't responding. And it kind of puts you in a position, again, back to the anti-fragile piece. You learn from it and you go, okay, if I can do this in this context with this constraint, I can do it anywhere. And it really is about paying attention to the audience's energy. Because let's imagine you're speaking at the end of the day. You've got an audience that's almost always tired. And I never get up and assume that the audience is all, oh my goodness, Owen Fitzpatrick's here. I can't wait to hear what he has to say. Nobody's ever thinking that, right? Maybe my mum would be thinking that, but she's the only person on the planet that would think that, right? So when I stand up on stage at 4 o'clock and I'm the last speaker, let's imagine, my goal is immediately to let the audience know, and sometimes I'll even start with this. I'll go, look, I just want you all to know I have a watch. I'm going to make sure I get you out on time. You will leave, but in exchange for me making sure that I'm super, focused on letting you go early, I need you to give me 100% attention. And something like that recognizes where that audience is, and it affects how they feel. And to me, the most important thing you can do for an audience is, how are you making them feel? The logic, the ideas, the insights, the frameworks, the skills that you do and teach, all that's great and it's important. But how you make the audience feel is the number one thing. And so you want them to feel, okay, we can go for a ride with this person. Why? Because they know what's important to us at this situation, and therefore we're going to go. It's the same if you start off. If you're speaking, I had to open a conference like 12 years ago in front of 5,000 people, and I got put at the very beginning because they said to me, and this was exactly what the organizers said, nobody else wants to do it. And it was in Eastern Europe, and it was 5,000 people, and I was like, right, so I've got an hour. I'm the first on. and they had like a huge speaker. I think it was Sir Richard Branson was at the end, which is the main reason. So here's this Irish guy. No one's heard of me. Everyone's like, what's this guy going to be talking about? So my whole thing was I had to get the energy going. And I'm not a speaker that just like I like to teach content and skills. So I'm always thinking, how do I make them feel a certain way, but how do I do it in my style? So I would suggest to any speakers out there, the same thing is true. You focus on the feeling. From your perspective, Lee, when you've seen some of the best, you've worked with some incredible speakers, when you see them at the beginning, like right there, grabbing the attention of the audience, what are the most impressive things that you've seen in terms of how they actually do that?
That is an interesting question because I now work with Jesse Cole, the Savannah Bananas, Tyler Gillum of the Savannah Bananas, and I'm starting to give this feedback to more of my speakers, which is you need to really think about how you enter the stage. It's getting a little bit old to just say, you know, somebody's up there, they're reading your script, which they've probably forgotten, so please bring your script with you, right? Because they were told it and they've forgotten it, so they're making things up. But just them reading a script, right, face down into the podium, and then saying, oh, and here's Owen Fitzpatrick. And now you walk in and there is no energy in the room. I think it's very important to think about how do you have that host help bring energy, right? The walk-up music helps. Maybe there's an entrance video. Maybe you're feeding them some of the words to help with that excitement and not just reading your bio, right? It's, you know, this is where they went to school. This is why they're important. Help them pump up, get energy into the room, and then start with a bang. I think I'm feeling that that's more and more important because the speakers I work with who get the best feedback start strong and end strong. So they start with an entrance that makes people go, wow, here's Owen, right? It's just, they're excited, they're awake, they're listening, they're not falling asleep during the space between the speakers. And then also when you leave, I find one thing that deflates the audience is when the speaker comes up and they say, you know, blah, 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 and does anybody have any questions? Are there any questions? And so you have this dead space and people are like, was I supposed to clap? Maybe not. Maybe I should say something. So I think don't deflate the audience. And questions at the end deflates. Always take questions, but walk, thank you, good night, walk off the stage, and then allow them to invite you back up and be like, oh, of course, I'd be happy to answer questions, right? And you come back up. Same thing when you get on. Never, ever, ever ask if your mic is working. Newer speakers do that. They'll come out, they'll start to talk, and then they'll go, tap, 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 tap. Is this working? Can you hear me okay? Oh my God. If they can't hear you, they will tell you. There are sometimes sound delays those first couple seconds. Just power through it. But really think about how you're going to come on the stage. So, all right, question for you, Owen. And this is, you need to have great stage presence. You need to think about what you're saying. But how do you know what the person's hearing, right? So I know the words go inside you. They go out. They go to the audience. But I'm sure that they don't hear the words as you say them, right? There must be some processing. And how does that impact what you say?
So I think from a psychology point of view, and by the way, just on the last question, I made every single one of the mistakes that you said many times. So I've corrected a couple of them, but there's still one I need to improve on. So I'm going to ensure I prioritize that. So thank you for that. When it comes to communicating and when it comes to influencing and when it comes to getting your message out there, the problem is that most people fall into the trap of thinking, if I say it, they will hear it. If they hear it, they will know it. If they know it, they will take the action on it. And there's a number of different mistakes that we make with this. First of all, just because you say it doesn't necessarily mean they hear what it is that you say. Of course, we hear the message, but then we interpret the message based upon what we think it means. And so often what I find is that just because I'm communicating what I think is a great idea, unless it resonates with the person that you're trying to communicate with, it's not going to land effectively. I like the concept of what I call becoming a belief leader. And that's different to a thought leader, because a thought leader comes up with a great idea or presents a big idea. But a belief leader is someone who's able to get belief in it. And the only way you can get someone to believe in it is if you get somebody who connects with it and resonates with it in the first place. Tamsin Webster, a good friend of mine, an excellent message design expert, one of the things she talks about is the importance of making sure that the message that you communicate has to resonate from the starting point with what the other person is already thinking. And I often teach whenever I'm trying to help people to be more persuasive is that if you try to persuade, and Adam Grant calls this logic bullying, with all of your data and all of your statistics and all the reasons why people need to do this and that and the other, then you're going to be okay if they already agree with you. But if they don't, then immediately you've switched them off because it's not going to resonate for them. So it has to be something that fits in with who they are, fits in with what they believe, fits in with maybe their cultural background, right? There's certain things that when I'm teaching in, let's say, Colombia, or I'm teaching in Italy, or I'm teaching in Japan, or I'm teaching in Thailand, that I have to know about the culture to adapt. And that's the same if you're teaching in New York versus if you're teaching in Oklahoma, right? You have to be able to adapt to the specific cultural nuances because that's going to determine how likely they are to respond. But if you can get a great idea that fits, I'll give you one of the best examples I've seen is Let Them by Mel Robbins. Now, Mel obviously is exceptional speaker. She's super charismatic, very engaging, the ideal speaker, really authentic. She's got so many things going for her. But she started out off with the 5-second rule, which is a cool, nice, straightforward, instead of being motivated, do this. Great. But Let Them is even more successful. It's been on the New York Times #1 for so long. It's sold 8 million plus books, which is insane for any sort of nonfiction book. So we have to go, well, Mel's already great. She already had a big population, but that's not enough to explain why Let Them succeeded more than her other 2 books. And I believe it's because it speaks perfectly in a way that resonates with what people are saying. There's so much of the struggles we have in our life where we're struggling with the fact that other people are not doing what we want them to do, or other people feel bad about the fact that we're not doing what they want us to do, or we're getting into problems in terms of relationships or with our family or with our friends or with our work colleagues because they're not gelling with what it is that we think they should and we should and all that sort of stuff. And if you look at the notion of Let Them, right, without even understanding anything inside the book itself, but it's let them do what they have to do. Let them be them. Don't allow it to necessarily knock you off, your own stride. And then the second part of it is let me take care of my stuff and focus. But it fits beautifully into what I think all of us are, the majority of people are thinking every single day. So when you're communicating a message as a speaker, one part is to get, and it's not just about a story, right? Stories are great and really important, but you want to have a point of view, a big idea. Nancy Duarte talks about how you have to have a unique point of view. And once you have this big idea, this point of view, this one line about what you think things should be like, and sometimes you could structure it as into say, some people think A, or most people think A, but actually B, and B is your big idea, right? There's ways to be able to position it, but you've got your big idea. I think once you have that, once you are clear about that, you then need to make sure that that big idea is presented in such a way that it fits into what the person thinks about and believes in. So it's not enough to have the big idea. It has to fit nicely into the way in which they're thinking so that they go, oh, yes, that's exactly what I need. Another example is the courage to be disliked, or the subtle art of not giving up. Like all of those are examples of things that resonate going, we so often think about, I wish I didn't give up. I wish that I had the courage to be disliked, that I didn't have to, bend over backwards to make sure everyone's happy. These are the big ideas that I think land the most. And so to me, in order for us to be as successful as we can at landing that, we need to speak in a way that they don't just hear our idea, they hear the collaborative idea, us and them, where it fits neatly into the way in which they've always been thinking. And when you can do that, that's when you truly resonate with an audience. Does that make sense?
It really does. And let me just follow up with another question here. Well, not my thoughts, which is you talk about understanding the audience and the audience needs and the culture of the audience. And I think, to me, such a big part of understanding that is just doing that pre-event call, right? Which is not a big deal, but to ask those questions of who's in the audience, what are their beliefs as it refers to what you're going to be talking about, so that you do know how to connect with them. And then the other thing is, I talk about customizing your talk, and it's funny that some speakers say, I customize my entire talk, which I don't think is the right thing to do, because then how do you ever make it better if it's always churning? And then some people who say, I will not change a single word because my talk is my talk. I think there's a 2% rule, and tell me what you think of that, which is the structure of my talk is what it is. My expertise is what it is, but I can customize 2% of that to use terminology that you understand and that resonates with you, and stories that will connect what I'm saying to your particular situation.
I think I like that. I would probably say, so I think that would work for most people. And I think the key would be on those customization calls to get some of the vernacular, some of the vocabulary, some of the terms, to be able to get some examples that you can, sprinkle in and stuff like that. Personally speaking, and this is just what I tend to do, I like customizing a little bit more. So I wouldn't say, it wouldn't be 50% customized, but it'd certainly be 30, 40%, because I love the idea that the audience, I'm as close to the audience as I possibly can get in terms of where they're. Now, it requires the downside is it requires more due diligence. So it might be one conversation, but it might be multiple conversations with it. Recently, I had a client that I did a keynote for, and I spoke to the CEO afterwards, and he was delighted with it. But one of the things he said is, he goes, you really listen. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, a lot of speakers listen, and then they get up and they do their presentation. And, you could just about tell they, throw a word here, a word there that makes them know that, it's for you. But it could have been a presentation to anyone. He said, you really made an effort to make it so that this was, exactly what was relevant to us. And that was because I had 3 or 4 conversations. But once again, to avoid what you mentioned as a potential problem, which I agree with, I still use the same elements, but I'm focusing them very much on the specific challenges or specific problems that they're facing. And now with AI, that gives us a chance to be able to do better research and to be more specific and to learn more about the industries we're working in. But I love to, and I also love the challenge of it. I love the challenge of that. But I think the 2% rule is excellent. And I think starting there, I absolutely think the worst thing you could do is just do your, dog and pony show, I call it. Like I'm just going to do my speech and stuff. To me, that's lazy. And again, I know that there's some speakers that will say, what you're talking about, my dog and pony show works perfectly and I've done it for many years. That's great. But for me, I'm thinking of the audience and I'm going, are you an entertainer with, an inspiring message that, might resonate with some, or do you really want to get to as many people as possible? And I don't know about, everybody, but I love, and I know a lot of speakers that I'm friendly with and stuff. The best thing you can do is to feel that you've made a real impact on the audience. And you do that by meeting them as well and ensuring that you bring your brilliance to the table, but you're also trying to make it so it fits in as well for them, to who they are, to what they need, to what they're struggling with. Because ultimately, what are we as speakers? We're trying to make the world a better place. And without being cliche, to make a world a better place, you need to be thinking about the world, right? The world needs the world needs. The people need what the people need. The audience needs what the audience needs. And our goal as a speaker isn't just to give them what we think they need. It's to ensure that whatever we think that they might need, we're able to confirm that and give it in a way that they need it. I hope that makes sense.
I know it actually does. But now, how do you position yourself that way? So, for example, you come in, you are a subject matter expert on organizational change, on mental, on leadership, things like that. But now, how do you position yourself as a leader? So obviously on a stage, you're positioning yourself as a leader, but what about, how does that tie into your social media, your website, your brand in general? How do you position yourself that way?
So I think the first step is we need clarity. So it's about being very clear about what is it that you actually do. And so there's lots of different marketing ways to be able to focus on what's your clear core idea, whatnot. But as a speaker, I always, if I'm seeing, let's say, an emerging speaker coming and they ask me to look at their stuff, what I look at is I go, right, what's their core big idea? And they might have a few, but they want to lead in with one sort of game-changing idea. And they should have a framework as well of some nature. It could be a very simple one, but it's something that they can walk people through so that they can actually take action from the actual, from the big idea itself. And then there's also the stories that they tell. And they might have what they call a signature story, which is the story of maybe how they used the big idea to change their life, the biggest lessons that they learned, or stories of people that they worked with and changes or transformations that the people that they work with made, or other changes or transformations that they made in their life. And so we want all of those as sort of, I call them mental assets that you have. Now, you can also have them as physical assets too. But in order for you to be able to ensure that that you're positioning yourself in the best possible way, you need to get clear of exactly what that looks like. And that means finding a sort of a connection between what is it that you do really well? How is it that people describe you when they see you speak? What are the kind of descriptors or adjectives that they tend to use? And what is it that your message is saying to them? What is the big idea that you're using to help transform them? And I think the more that you focus on all of that, the more there's a consistency of you. And I think, honestly, when you're able to demonstrate that you understand people, and you're able to demonstrate that you have an idea or a way of thinking or a framework or a methodology that can help them to solve their problem, to help them to overcome their challenges, to me, that's when they see you as a leader. We're not leaders because we tell people we're leaders. We're leaders because we lead. And the way in which we lead hearts and minds, especially through turbulent times, is to be able to ensure that we're connecting with these turbulent times and we're helping them to see. And again, the heart is how they feel. The mind is what they think. We need both in order to cultivate a belief. A belief is an idea we feel certain about. So to get people to become a belief leader, they need to be good at getting people to feel a certain way as well as think a certain way. And that way, that will become a belief for the audience member, and the audience member will leave. And when we're doing that through social media or marketing, once again, we do it in micro ways. We try to, every post that you post on social media, it could be the one that changes a person's life. I know that might seem like hyperbole, but how often have we just seen something and it was just said in a different way that we ever heard before, and it changed the way in which we thought about things? And so to me, I think so often we fall into the trap of, telling people how many accolades we have. And I think when you actually do the work, that's what really drives change.
So interesting. A couple of things you said there. One being about the adjectives you use. My advice to emerging speakers is if you went to your website and took out all the adjectives, what's left and what does it say? Because often I'll go to a website of an emerging speaker and it'll say the most amazing, bestest, most fantastic speaker who's in demand and bestseller all over the world. And I'm going, about what? So I would say take all the superlatives out, see what's left, and is that your message?
I love that.
Yeah, and then the other thing, look, see if you agree on this one. Simon Sinek, for me, is someone that when you look at his social posts, every post you sit back and go, wow. He just really said something that was eye-opening, that impacted me, that could impact others. I think he's a good person to look at just as far as in social media. What is his message is really clear, even when he's just chatting with someone about how you, the listener, can make a difference in the world.
Yeah, I would agree. I think so with Simon Sinek, and I know he worked with Mark Levy, who I've been lucky enough to work with as well. And one of the things that Mark talks about as being important is, and this was an eye-opening moment for me, is that the big ideas that land aren't always the ones that are just counterintuitive, that you go, oh my goodness, I never thought about that. They're also the things that you've been saying, not articulating as well, but you're trying to say, yeah, exactly. So it's like the big idea can work if it's, and I think Mark calls it the big sexy idea, but the big idea can work if it's something that makes them go, oh yeah, actually, yeah, that's really, or it can work if they go, see, come here, see this is it, because people want to share it. They want to say, I've been telling you this for ages. Look, Simon Sinek says it, right? So I think what Simon does well, and Adam Grant does this as well, a lot of these, top level thought leaders, who I would argue are belief leaders as well, because they're making a real impact. But what makes them so good is, once again, that their finger on the pulse, and they're able to then articulate the message in a way that matches it. And if you even look at Simon's Start With Why, the reason that resonated is because when you heard it, it wasn't like, it was like, oh, this is a brand new idea. To a degree, good purpose, purpose-based leadership or purpose-based marketing is starting with why. But the simplicity, the articulation, the presentation of it, most people see it like this: what, how, why. But actually, we need to go why, how, what. So simple. But let them, 5-second rule, start with why, right? Give and take. Like, all of these are simple ideas, beautifully articulated in a way that resonate with the audience. And when you have that mixture, whether it's through social media, whether it's through your newsletter, your podcast, your YouTube channel, it's what lands. And when you can sort of find that recipe, that's when people resonate, and that's when people perceive you as, okay, this is somebody I want to spend more time learning from. And then perhaps this is a person we want to get in. We need them to spread this message. Why? Because either A, this is a game changer, or B, I want all my entire company, I need them to know this, and they aren't listening to me. So let me bring in Simon, let me bring in, whoever else, and then they will make sure that they get the message across.
So let's talk a little bit about you now.
Sure.
Just to give a great example, right? Can you tell us a little bit about let's say your brand? What is your message? How did you do this? How is that refined on your website, your message? Like, why would people hire you, and how do you communicate that? What words do you use? What impressions do you use?
So this is something that I've been working on a lot over the last year or so, and I'm currently getting to the finishing stages of rebranding. So as you see it from one week to the next, it might change a little bit more, but it's all been going in the right direction, which is, my main thing is everything to do with beliefs. I've been fascinated with them since I was younger. I struggle with my own I struggled with depression when I was younger, my own self-esteem, and I was suicidal for a while. And that kind of drove me to try to learn everything I could about my own psychology, about my own brain, and in particular about why I believed what I believed. And so over 25 to 30 years, traveling to over 100 countries, interviewing people in Afghanistan and North Korea, and all of this stuff I kind of communicate in terms of my bio and in terms of the stories and whatnot. Everything I've been looking at is trying to understand, why do we believe what we believe, and how can we change it, and what happens when people actually change, not just change their minds, but what happens when we believe something differently. And so my main focus has been working on this area I call inner propaganda. And this is how we are persuading ourselves all the time through the stories that we sell to ourselves. And the stories that we sell to ourselves become the beliefs that we buy into. Because we talk about telling ourselves a story, but that's not enough. Because you could tell yourself a story and you might not fully believe it. And if you don't, it's not going to make any impact upon you. You have to sell the story to yourself. And so I've unpacked the notion of inner propaganda. It's the first time I mentioned it was in my TEDx talk, which I was delighted that went viral, has more than 1 million views to date. Mm-hmm. And this notion of inner propaganda is that we're so focused on propaganda now, which is a huge buzzword in the environment, because you just have to turn on the TV or turn on your laptop or your phone, and you will see all of these messages, people try to convince you of their point of view. But we also have our internal propaganda machine. Your brain is a double agent, and its goal is to be able to keep you safe and keep things stable. And to do so, it's going to convince you of certain things that aren't necessarily true and also aren't necessarily useful. And so my goal is, I want to help as many people as possible to learn how their inner propaganda works, to learn why they believe what they believe, to learn why other people believe what they believe, so that they can do really two things. Number one, run their brain better, change the beliefs that they have that limit them, improve their mental health and make them better decision makers. And number two, helping them to be able to impact others more. That means influencing people better and cultivating belief in the folks that they work with, but also, and this is particularly important, healing the polarization that is occurring in society. Because I think we need to recognize we are our own propaganda machines. And I hear thought leaders talking about it all the time, the problem is propaganda, these people. And as soon as you say that, it means, yeah, propaganda is what they consume. I'm educating myself. I'm doing my own research. But they're falling for the propaganda. And that's wrong. We're all propaganda machines. And we need to recognize that, because once we do, that gives us an insane opportunity to transform. And that's really where my latest book, coming out in August 2026, it's called Inner Propaganda. And it's my 10th book, but it's the most enjoyable thing that I've ever produced. I talk about, a fascinating double agent in World War II. I go into the science, the neuroscience behind what goes on. I explain a lot of the psychological science, and I talk about the framework that in order for a belief to change, it needs to feel right, it needs to fit in, and only then will it make sense. And once you learn how this works, it can transform how impactful you are as a communicator, as a leader, as a speaker, as a coach, because it's really designed to help you understand yourself more and help you understand other people more. And we talk about all sorts of different stories from thousands of years of history. I don't make any big political descriptions in it because you don't want to touch that, but I do try to explain why we are in the situation that we're in and offer some strategies and ways through. But that's really what I'm working on, and it's, again, something I love talking about. So
well, thank you for sharing that, because my next question was going to be, I knew you had this book coming out, and you gave a great, throughout this podcast, there's been a great reading list, and I'm already going, oh, I need to read this, I need to read that. But I think your book coming out is so great for speakers of any level, because talk about people that need to believe in what they're saying, what they're teaching, whatever. I mean, they are sharing, but you've got to go up there with a strong personal belief system, I think. That's part of what makes you a speaker, right? That you want to share this. And so about the time this podcast is coming out, I believe it'll be available for sale or pre-sale. So please do check that out, plus the rest of the list that Owen was talking about. I certainly will. And now I'd like to just wrap this with one other question, which might be easy or not, I don't know. But you've come a long way in your speaking. You've come a long way, as you said, you had doubts and inner depression and all this, which a lot of people suffer from. If you had to go back and talk to yourself when you were either getting on that first stage or trying to get on that first stage, what is one piece of advice that you have now? What one piece of advice really would matter to emerging speaker Owen Fitzpatrick?
I think I would have to go back to the start and reiterate the very first question you asked me, because I think that when I was an emerging speaker years ago, I was constantly asking myself the question, am I, good enough? Will I ever be good enough? Have I got what it takes? That was the way I used to articulate it. And the reality is, I think I was playing the wrong game. And if I was speaking to myself starting off, probably what I would say is that get your mind on the right game. The right game is, it's not about enough, it's about better. And it's about you continuously getting better. And sometimes people go, well, I don't want to have to force myself to get better, because when are you enough? You're enough because you're breathing. The key isn't about whether you're enough. That's a non-question. The key is that you're looking to improve and get better. Why? Because the better that you are, the more you can impact more people. And that's our goal as speakers. So get your head in the right game, and the right game is, how can I get better? To me, I believe that starts to become a belief leader. Your goal is to get other people to believe better, but that means you need to believe better yourself first. And to me, when you focus on better as opposed to enough, then you're going in the right direction. And that's exactly what I would say to myself.
Well, thank you so much for that. And thank you everyone for listening. I look forward to seeing you again soon on the next Path to the Main Stage podcast. Thanks for listening to Path to the Main Stage. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And for full video episodes, check out YouTube. If you want to be a successful speaker, you need to make it happen. My co-hosts and I are here to help guide you. But if you need more help, please check out pathtothemainstage.com, where we can connect. And until next time, keep sharing your voice, keep showing up, and keep taking your path to the main stage.